let's talk about some of the key Limerick issues that frequently come up here. There's a lot of investment, emotional and intellectual, I can tell you, among our listeners when it comes to rail. So one of the key projects is the Foynes to Limerick rail project, which is well underway at this stage. What's the latest on it?
Good morning, Joe, and good morning to your listeners, and thank you for having me on this morning. I think the Foynes project is a key project for us because it's part of the overall plan, the long-term plan for public transport as a whole across the island of Ireland. But I suppose if we concentrate on the Limerick region and the Midwest region, which is as a local here as well, I'm very interested in. So the Foynes line is well advanced on reconnecting Foynes Port with the National Rail network. All the track is now relayed. We will expect him to have live freight trains on that by middle of next year. So track is in. We are now starting with the signalling and the automation of the level crossings along the route.
So we have been given hope that the Foynes line may carry passengers at some point. How realistic is that, and is there a time frame for it?
It's very realistic, Joe. We are putting in for freight activity, but we've been asked to consider how we would carry passengers to the Ryder Cup in 27, for example. So we are looking at that. We're working with the National Transport Authority in putting a plan together that we can carry passengers by 2027.
And ideally then, would people be able to do a park and ride scenario, out that part of County Limerick into town, or stops along the way, and would one of those stops be Adair?
Yeah, the overall plan for the LSMATS, the Limerick Shannon Metropolitan Area Transport Strategy, would see passenger services from Adair, from Patrick's Well, right around Limerick. The railway is unique in Limerick in that you're almost in a horseshoe around Limerick. So you have the old cement factory line down to Castlemungret, which can be used. You have the Foynes line you've just spoken about. You have the Innes line. So there's a lot of ability and capacity that can be added to the Limerick region over time.
Indeed, and it's something that we've heard a lot, including here, for decades. And it says something, I suppose, about how people were futuristic looking even back then when the original rail lines went in. Because of where Colbert Station is located too, we're ideal for commuter rail.
We absolutely are. We absolutely are, Joe. And when you stand back and look at what we've been doing over time, I think you mentioned Colbert. If you look at what we've achieved in Colbert in the last couple of years, we now have a really modern transport hub there, and what we've invested in the last couple of years. You have cycling, walking, bus, train, all in the one facility within 3 to 5 minutes walk of the centre of the city. So as we develop out the whole commuter network for Limerick, it's almost a no-brainer.
Now, there has been a history of antisocial behaviour in and around Colbert Station, which, to be fair, has seen improvements. But there have also been calls, as you know, for a dedicated transport police service from bus drivers in Limerick. Is that something that you'd back in terms of rail too?
Absolutely. We have to, the security of our passengers and indeed our staff is foremost in our minds. Antisocial behaviour is a part of society, sadly, from our younger, from when you and I were young fellas, Joe, but it was different. But it's now something we've got to deal with. And having a dedicated police force, dedicated Garda force, whatever, concentrated on that. We have very good relationships with the Gardaí. We've built it up over time. We have ex-Gardaí working with us that have that lens of looking at security and is working well. But it will always be a challenge, there's no question.
Right. We're talking to Jim Meade, who's the CEO of Iarnród Éireann. He's in Limerick for a discussion on the future of rail transport today. There's a train station planned for Moyross. What's the update on that?
Moyross is moving very, very well, and we will be giving an update to all the elected reps today on it. So we're at planning stage. We have identified the best solution. We've been the best location, I should say, for it. So, and it is part of the overall picture there as we build out for Moyross, for Ballysimon. We're also looking at park and ride in Ballysimon, and they're the initial steps of the greater plan for Limerick.
You mentioned Ballysimon. I mentioned it in the context of the new Lidl opening there, but there's an enormous amount happening in that specific area. Yeah. It is crying out actually for a train station. So how quickly will it see one?
We're in the planning phase for that, and I think one of the most important things about this kind of infrastructure, we talk a lot in this country about infrastructure, but when we build out railways, we build 100-year infrastructure. Like the railways just passed its 190th birthday across the island of Ireland. It'll be there another 100 years. So it's important for us not to be thinking about today, but we're building for the generations to come. We're building for your grandchildren and mine out there. So there are certain things we need today, and we need more service, we need more capacity. But actually, our plan has to be about what do we need in 20, 30, 50 years' time. That's why the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review was so important. We spent a lot of time working on that with the Department of Transport, and we now have a vision document all the way out to 2050 that looks how we decarbonise heavy rail in this case, but how we look at all of public transport. And that is about building for the future, for the long-term future, and building that counterbalance to Dublin. One of the big positives for Limerick and for the Midwest, and not just because I'm a Clareman sitting here in Limerick, but I actually believe we have to push forward very, very quickly to create that counterbalance and growth. So the LS Met's plan, what we're doing in Galway, what we're doing in Cork, is all about that regional balance.
Right. Does that mean that there are careers in Irish rail that you would say to people listening this morning, it's worth considering?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. When we employ people, we say that to them. It's not just a particular job. You can move across Irish Rail. You can have a career across Irish Rail. I don't know if you're aware, Joe. I started as an apprentice many years ago here in Limerick as an apprentice fitter, and now I find myself. I don't want to admit how many years later, but over 4 decades later, as chief executive, I never envisaged that. But I moved right across, and we have loads and loads of examples of people who come in various roles and migrate through the whole company.
Does that help you, by the way, when you are dealing with people across Iarnród Éireann, that if someone comes to you, be that a fitter or otherwise, it's quite likely that you have a deep understanding of certain roles because you did some of them?
Oh yeah, it's a case of been there, done that. I have the T-shirts right across. I've worked in every area of the company, and that's a big help in understanding the challenges we have, understanding how the whole piece works together. Because people see the front end of the company and the service we deliver, or in the in the passenger trains or freight trains. There's a massive amount of industries. We have civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, signalling, telecoms. We have a wide variety. We have an awful lot of skill sets, and we have a very, very significant talent development program with apprentices, with graduates, right across the organisation.
Does that help with mutual respect between you and staff?
I think so, but mutual respect, it doesn't need to have that. Mutual respect must always be given and required, because if you don't give people respect, you don't get respect. So I think it's about what we deliver for the customer long term, and how we operate the company to its best advantages.
Well, back to that, you mentioned LS MATS, the Limerick Shannon Metropolitan Area Transport Plan, and it also identifies Corbally, Ula and Palace Green, County Limerick, as possible locations for future train stations. Are they realistic plans?
They are. There's certain stations in plan at the moment, and others in the long-term plan. One of the great pluses of the strategic review is there's regular reviews built into it. While it looks out all the way to 2050 and decarbonisation and what we'll deliver, that's not the final plan. We will review it every number of years to see, well, how have things changed, how have demographics changed, and where do we think the next demands will be. There is an element of how we develop out for densification and transport orientated development. So if you take Cork, for example, they've been working on it for a while. We are very, very, very close to finishing the infrastructure in Cork, where we can put a 10-minute dart service between Mallow Cove, Middleton. And Cork, the two Cork local authorities are looking at where they build out stations and where they do their densification around those stations, so that public transport is the preferred mode of travel.
Mm. Do you believe that you can be part of the solution, for example, to Limerick city centre, in the sense that if you can get people from various parts of the county and beyond to simply take rail to Colbert Station, be in the city centre and get back on the train again, it enhances the offering?
Absolutely, Joe. You have to think of public transport in the round, not just rail. So the whole public transport family, be it active travel, walking, cycling, buses, in the case of Dublin, Lewis, etc., how they all integrate with each other and how they all fit together. And certainly when you look at Colbert above, we are talking to the Land Development Agency, the LDA, around what developments we can do there, how we can repopulate that area, and how people can use Colbert as a centre for that.
Right. The rail link from the city to Shannon Airport has been much talked about, and again you look across Europe, for example, and it's core to public transport, a rail link to airports. This is too part about of the ongoing development of Shannon Airport and therefore the region. It still feels a long way away, and you would think it's an absolute priority.
It is a priority, Joe, absolutely, for the region, for Shannon and for Limerick. But it has been talked about since my young days, even here as a young manager here in Limerick. But what we have achieved now is now in a plan. It's now actually in a plan. It's not been talked about anymore. So it is one of the strands of the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review. There's a couple of years in getting through planning, identifying the preferred route, getting it costed, getting a railway order to deliver it. but it is now part of that plan. And for decades it's been talked about, but it's now in the plan.
Okay. And you'll avoid the flooding problems you have on the Limerick to Ennis rail line, will you, wherever it goes?
Well, the flooding issue is at Ballycar, which is north of where you'd be coming off the line. But that issue also, we have worked with the OPW, with Clare County Council, Parks and Wildlife, etc., and we have a plan in place now how we can hopefully eliminate that flooding.
And how quickly could that happen? Because it causes problems, as you know, pretty regularly.
Yeah, every couple of years we lose the line for anything from 6 to 10, 12 weeks. So we're there. We have it costed. We're back with government now for the funding.
Right. Lots of people travel from Limerick to Dublin regularly, and there are even people living in Limerick who commute daily to jobs in Dublin. So they're obviously interested in seeing a fast and efficient service. What's the fastest you can make that journey time?
Well, we currently do it in a couple of services are 1:59 today. So there's a really good service. There's a half-hourly service in the morning and evening. We're probably the only city in the network that has a half-hourly service. As we improve the network, as we improve the line speeds, as we electrify the lines, we can even get faster. So something around the 140, 145 for Limerick is very doable.
Right. Now, ideally, people want to avoid the change at Limerick Junction, but I think most of the trains stop there. And a bit confusingly, those trains are usually shorter journey times than the direct ones. Can we ever get to a situation where we have very fast, regular direct trains?
I think as we grow the network, absolutely, you will have a combination of fast and then stopping trains, because obviously everybody wants to go from their station to their destination and don't want to stop between. But we have to accommodate everybody. So yes, the plan is as we up the frequency of trains. So we have an order of trains coming in. We placed the largest, greenest land-based order a number of years ago when I signed a contract for almost €1 billion for 750 new vehicles, 150 train sets. The first of those has now arrived and is being commissioned, so they'll roll out over the next couple of years. They will allow us cascade the trains out of the intercity trains that are currently on commuter work into the regions, which will allow us to increase capacity and increase frequency. So there is a very detailed plan that will see significant step change both in capacity and frequency over the next couple of years.
Right. I smiled when you mentioned train sets because it reminds you of being a kid. But anyway, so LS Mats mentions a dual track from the city to Limerick Junction. What's the purpose of that?
The purpose of that is to increase frequency and to give us more capacity on the line. So when you think of Fines coming online, and Pat Keating from Shannon Fines Port will be with us later to speak to the stakeholders that we have present, because the potential of Fines is significant. Already we have stakeholders talking to us about what they'd like to move through Fines now that they see track being laid. It's no longer something we're talking about. So various companies can see that there's track going in and that it's going to be a reality within 12 to 18 months. So they're now talking about how we can move. So the port is very important. So the double tracking out to Limerick Junction then is just to give us more track access, just more slots on the track.
Right. When Limerick people come back from countries like Japan, for example, they will talk about the speed of the trains that they were on. So how fast can we see a train getting from Limerick to Dublin with improvements such as electrification?
Well, our current line speed is 160 kilometres an hour, and the country isn't big enough for really high speeds because you want to serve the communities along the way. So for us, it's about getting everything up to 160, maybe 180 kilometres an hour. That's our target. So, and it's about doing that regularly, keeping it at that, and then putting in the frequency. I suppose the key.
So, just to be clear, when we hear politicians then talk about, it should only be an hour to get from Limerick city centre to Dublin on bullet trains, that's pie in the sky.
Well, it's a cost versus return factor, right? So, are you going to get the return from it? And actually, we know from studies with people and studies internationally, you give a reliable service, you give a regular service, a punctual service. That's what people want. They do a bit of work on the train, whatever. Time isn't actually always the most important factor.
Right. So we're told that encouraging people out of cars is a key part of tackling climate change, for example, and persuading someone who's always travelled by car to Dublin to take the train instead is part, I'm sure, of your remit. Now, as it happens, I was about to take the car recently and the weather was terrible. So I said, well, I'm going to let the professional take me on a train. But it was a last minute decision, so I did exactly what you would want me to do. I walked from this radio station up to Colbert, went in and bought a ticket. However, you kind of charged me an arm and a leg for that late decision change.
Well, I think you answered your own question, Joe. A late decision change. And if you book in advance, you get very, very reasonable tickets. And we want you to plan that more, because we will have turned the corner when people say to themselves, "I've got to go from A to B. What public transport will I use?" That was your last decision. It should have been your first decision. So you should never have been considering the car. The weather shouldn't have been a factor. You should always have been thinking, "I'm going to use public transport." And when we get to that inflection point where people go, "I have to take the car. I don't really want to." That's when we've really turned the corner on public transport and people using public transport and all forms of public transport. I live out in Bunratty. I travel to Dublin. I stay up a couple of nights a week. I have it down to a fine art. I mean, I know the Lewis. I know all the Lewis times. I get the 5 o'clock down yesterday evening to be here with you this morning. I left the office at 25 to 5 because I know it's a 2-minute walk to the Lewis. It's 14 minutes on the Lewis. It's 2 minutes walk into the station onto the 5 o'clock because I use it regularly. So people have got to get into that mode of public transport is better. It's better if you walk a bit. It's better if you cycle a bit, and then you integrate all the modes, and we stay away from the cars. So please come back to us the next time, but just think about it a bit earlier, and you'll get a much better fare.
Right. So it is a deliberate policy on your part to make it more attractive and cheaper to do it that way rather than last minute.
Absolutely.
And you don't apologise for that, clearly.
No more. I mean, it's the same as if you decide if you've got to fly somewhere tomorrow, you'll see the same in the airlines.
Right.
So you get really good value if you book online and you book in advance.
Okay. Peter in Kilmallock, regular listener. Every time someone from Iarnród Éireann is on, he's on with us. Asking you, Jim, as the CEO, are you happy with the condition of the roof of the station in Kilmallock? Peter says it's dire. And additionally, will there ever be rail travel in Kilmallock? He thinks it could be very helpful for things like the Ryder Cup.
Good morning, Peter. Absolutely. Kilmallock Station, reopening of Kilmallock Station isn't in our current plan, but but there's no reason it can't be. There's no technical reason we wouldn't reopen Kilmallock Station, and I think it will be part of the further reviews. So there has been, and I'm sure Peter has been at the head of it, there has been a lobby to add it to the agenda, and I think it will be added to the agenda, but I have to be honest with you and say it's not in the current plan that we're looking at.
Okay. Finally then, where's the conference this morning and what else is it touching on?
The conference this morning is over in the Strand Hotel, and it is touching all the things we've been talking about. It is, I suppose, bringing all the key stakeholders across the region up to speed on the advancements we've made, and we've made a lot of advancements since we spoke to them last. So I suppose showing them that we've started to deliver on the promises we made, that the plans are solid and that they're coming true. So it will talk about the things you spoke, where we are with My Ross, where we are with Ballysimon, where we are with fines, an overview of what we're going to do around decarbonisation and what the greater plan for the network is. And as I mentioned earlier, this is, and the message for the stakeholders, this is about building for the long term, building for the generations to come, and ensuring that the stakeholders here in the region, and it is a regional issue, it's not just a Limerick issue, it is a regional issue, continue to lobby and support us and support other agencies to make sure the investment happens in the Midwest. We have to, there's a lot of development around Dublin and it's growing, but really the Midwest region has such potential if we just put some infrastructure into it and help it grow.
And presumably you need our cabinet minister, our ministers of state, our ministers in the region to push that agenda on the people's behalf ultimately.
Absolutely, Joe. And I have to say, in fairness to the previous government and the current government, we're getting good support for it, cross-party support. I think people realise that we need the infrastructure. I mean, people look back and say when the crash happened back in 08-09, we should have continued to invest in infrastructure. It was a bad decision. It wasn't a bad decision. That was the decision that people made at the time with the best information they had. Our responsibility is to make sure we learn from that experience and we do the right thing now going forward. So we've got to continue to invest in infrastructure, and we've got to invest in the regional cities in the Midwest, Galway, Limerick, Cork, Waterford.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming in. So, I mean, you talk about 2050, you talk about our grandchildren, you talk about the long-term plan. Yeah. But how quickly do you think, to go back to the point you were making, people's mentality will change and most of us will choose public transport to get around Limerick or to go to Cork or Galway or Waterford or Dublin by rail, for example?
I think people's attitude will change quite quickly. And let me give you an example of it, Joe. We have been working for a couple of years now, changing the infrastructure in Cork. And about a year and a half ago, we went from an hourly service from Cove, Middleton, Mallow to a half-hourly service. So the people in Mallow, Cove, Middleton, in and out of Cork City have a half-hourly option every 30 minutes. But the growth we've seen in that has been phenomenal. Now, Cove is an island, you'd say, well, there's not many more people can come off of Cove, but 40, 50, 60, 40% increase in numbers out of Cove, 50% increase in numbers out of Middleton, and 60% increase in numbers out of Mallow, because they have the frequency, they have the capacity, and they're migrating across the public transport.